I'm Stephanie. Welcome to the Reading Room. This is the playlist where I review what I read in the last month, and I do my best to keep my reviews spoiler-free, or at least I'll warn you if I'm going to spoil something, but I feel like I've done pretty good, as if I do want to get into spoilery territory, I'll just review each book separately. And as I always say in my reviews, these are solely about the books and not about the authors as people. So before we get into this month's reviews, I'm going to be really honest and say that November was a very tough month for me. My husband and I had to say goodbye to our dog, and it was really tough. It really gutted me. Even though we knew he was approaching the end of his life, it happened very suddenly. And so after we had to say goodbye, I honestly didn't really have an interest in anything and didn't really feel like picking up that many books this month. I did end up surprising myself and read more than I expected to. So I'm going to say that my mood and feelings probably colored some of my reviews and reading experiences this month. So take them all with a grain of salt. But I do want to share something that we got so we could keep him around for the holidays. So this is from Crown & Paw, which is not sponsored, but Crown & Paw, I am open to sponsorships. But come on, is that not perfect? My little man's expression was so perfect for this Home Alone portrait, and I'm so happy that he gets to now be with us for the holiday season. Trust me, we have 3 other portraits done by Crown & Paw of him that we keep up year round, but I had to go ahead and get this one because, oh, look at him. Look at how cute he is. And he then got to be on the wall and watch us put up the tree. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually get into the book reviews for this month. So first up was a book that I'd had on my October to be read pile for spooky season, just didn't have enough time to get to it, and that is The Spite House by Johnny Compton. So let's go ahead and see what this one promises. Eric Ross is on the run from a mysterious past with his 2 daughters in tow. When he comes across a strange ad for the Masson house in Degner, I'm probably not saying that correctly, Degner, Texas, Eric thinks that they may have finally caught a lucky break. The most haunted place in Texas needs a caretaker. All they need to do is stay in the house and keep a detailed record of everything that happens there. Provided the house's horrors don't drive them all mad, like the caretakers before them. The job calls to Eric, not just because there's a huge potential payout, but because he needs access to the secrets of the Spite House. If it is indeed haunted, maybe it will help him understand the uncanny power that clings to his family, driving them from town to town, too afraid to stop running. A terrifying gothic thriller about grief and death and the depths of a father's love, Johnny Compton's The Spite House is a stunning debut by a horror master in the making. So overall, I thought that this was a pretty good read. The house and the spirits are super creepy in this, and the description of the house is very unsettling. If you enjoy supernatural stories that also bring a sense of like real history, this is definitely a good read. Now, while I liked it, I do think there is a lot going on here that gets a bit overly complex. We've got a lot of separate mysteries that don't really tie together in the end. There's the creepy spite house that was built to literally spite the people of the town. The ghosts that call the house home and drive people away, or if they choose to stay, drives them insane. The woman who hired Eric and why she wants him to stay at the house. Eric's own family history with the supernatural and why he and his daughters are on the run in the first place. I liked each of the ideas and themes here, but it was just a bit much to have them all smushed together in one story, especially since we don't get resolutions to some of these stories. It also felt like we spent a lot of time setting up the history of the house, instead of just being there for these scary things that are happening in the house, and understanding why they're happening. How are the house and Eric's stories really connected? Now, I get what Compton was going for here, but again, I just don't think it really came together really well in the end. And I still just have a lot of questions about what happened in the end. And I'm not going to get resolutions to them, which really made this more disappointing than I expected. The characters are really good and distinct and easy to identify, which is good because there are a lot of characters to keep track of in this. And there's also a lot of point of views. But I really identified and liked his daughter Des, who is Eric's eldest daughter. Stacy, his other daughter, was super cute, and LaFonda is someone that I would just love to spend a day with. And even the characters that I didn't really like, I thought they were well written and well rounded out. The dialogue in this is also not the best, and it has a lot of info dumping. Like, characters often launch into like story time to catch us up to what's going on and are essentially just telling us stories. It felt really forced, and I didn't love how frequently we had super long monologues from the characters. I mean, like, there are points where certain characters are talking for like 3 pages with no breaks for action or description. It has really slowed the story down, which is unfortunate as I felt this already had a few pacing issues outside of story time. Because the pacing in this is really, really slow. I was so into this book at first, but my interest really started to wane probably around the 60% mark, and it's about the time that all these other different like plot threads are being woven in. It just really slowed the story down and breaks it up into things that, again, I don't think came back together really well in the end. But to give the story kudos, when it was creepy, it was very creepy. And I really liked a lot of the supernatural elements that were at play in this. When Compton committed to the scary stuff happening inside the house, I thought it really worked. I ended up giving this, I'm going to say 3 stars. I was entertained and curious, but I don't think this was like mind-blowing. This is Compton's debut, and he does show a lot of promise. I really enjoyed his overall writing style. I mean, just fix some of the dialogue, my man, and like trim some stuff up, but it was good. He has really great ideas, he excels at characterization, and he can build some real tension. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out for him and would love to see how he can grow his skills in paranormal stories, because it's obvious he has a lot of passion for it, and I think he could be a really great author. Next up was a little novella that I added on to one of my Book of the Month subscriptions, and this was my first read after losing our little man, and I actually kind of just wanted something sad and something that dealt with grief. And at a little over 100 pages, I felt that this was going to be a pretty easy read and get me back into the swing of things. And I absolutely love Sophie Kinsella, so I picked up What Does It Feel Like by her. So let's go ahead and see what this promised. Eve is a successful novelist who wakes up one day in a hospital bed with no memory of how she got there. Her husband, never far from her side, explains that she has had an operation to remove the large malignant tumor growing in her brain. As Eve learns to walk, talk, and write again, and she wrestles with her diagnosis and how and when to explain it to her beloved children, she begins to recall what's most important to her. Long walks with her husband's hand clasped firmly around her own, family game nights, and always buying that dress when she sees it. Each of the brief anecdotes that comprise this book is an attempt to answer the type of impossible questions recognizable to anyone navigating the labyrinth of grief. This short, extraordinary novel is a celebration of life, shot through with warmth and humor. It will both break your heart and put it back together again. So, I mean, the book kind of, or the synopsis kind of tells you that it's definitely a collection of little vignettes and snapshots of life, and it's obviously very, very personal to Kinsella's journey with cancer. I really appreciated how real this was in accepting an uncomfortable truth. Like, we all know that we're dying, but it's very different having a doctor tell you that it's coming sooner rather than later. How do you grieve for your life when it isn't over yet? How do you keep moving forward knowing that your deadline is closer than you think it is? How do you live with that? And even though the book is fictionalized, it is very obvious that it's Kinsella's own story. The main character is a writer, and we basically see her write Confessions of a Shopaholic. Trust me, I have read that book more times than I can count. I know the opening line by heart. But I get it. And Kinsella even addresses this in her author's note when she talks about this being very personal to her, but she had to fictionalize it to help her get through this writing process. It's a very quick read, as again, it's pretty small, and it's just short little glimpses into her life instead of a cohesive narrative. I actually do think that this could have been a full-blown book filled with her heart and humor. The message at the end is very beautiful, and though I wasn't dealing, obviously, with what she was going through, I definitely connected with a lot of the feelings that Eve was going through. I'm not actually sure if I'm going to give this a star reading, since again it's 100 pages, and even with that, the text is huge, so it is a very, very fast read. And this is, again, kind of different than the books that I normally pick up and read. And I'm really glad that she got to share her story her way, and I totally understand that writing that was therapeutic. I would say if you are also dealing with something kind of tough or grieving a loss, this could be a really good read for you. It was definitely a good read for me at the time, and really just allowed me, I don't want to say to wallow in my grief, but in a way kind of do that, because it's okay to feel your feelings. And I really liked how this book addressed that. So next up was The Book of Witching by CJ Cooke. And again, this was another holdover from spooky season that I wasn't going to wait until Halloween 2025 to read. I've really enjoyed The Lighthouse Witches by CJ Cooke and was really excited to get into this, as I love all things witchy. But let's go ahead and see what this promised. Clem gets a call that is every mother's worst nightmare. Her 19-year-old daughter, Erin, is unconscious in the hospital after a hiking trip with her friends on the remote Orkney Islands met a horrifying end, leaving her boyfriend dead and her best friend missing. When Erin wakes, she doesn't recognize her mother, and she doesn't answer to her name, but insists she is someone named Nix. Clem travels to the site of her daughter's accident, determined to find out what happened to her. The answer may lie in a dark secret in the history of the Orkneys. A woman wrongly accused of witchcraft and a murder 4 centuries ago. Clem begins to wonder whether Erin's strange behavior is a symptom of a broken mind or the effects of an ancient curse. So I kind of got to address the elephant in the room with this. This had a really slow start, and to me it had a lot of pacing problems. I think Cooke is a great writer, but I really was not into this story until about 100 pages in. And that's a lot of commitment for hoping for a really good payoff. I do think that she pulled off the dual timeline well, because that little synopsis does not tell you, but you're following both Clem and her daughter Erin in the present, and then the witch from 400 years ago. But that also makes me wonder if the book needed the 2 stories. They do end up connecting and coming together, but I didn't actually really feel that satisfied with some of the explanations around their connection. I mean, really it's a lack thereof of explanations on some things. And in a way, this story kind of felt undercooked, which I guess is a little funny given that the author's last name is Cooke. I really think that this book could have done really well if it was broken up into a trilogy. So we would have the first book, who follows Allison, the woman who was accused of witchcraft 400 years ago. The second book could then follow Erin and Clem in the present. And the third would follow another character that I can't really talk about, as it would kind of spoil something. But I do think that splitting this book up would have tightened the pace, given each character's story more room to breathe, and expand on the lore and connect the storylines in a more satisfactory way. There were some things that were explained, but I still have a lot of questions, and I think maybe I just wanted more in-depth explanations to explain what was going on in this. I really liked Allison's chapters at first. Near the end, they did get a little repetitive, I do think the history was very rich, she was a very compelling character, and it was really neat to see life back in the 1500s, where people in power are using magic for their own gain, but then punishing those that can do magic to keep that power and control over people. I did end up getting intrigued by what was going on with Clem and Aaron, but again, that happened kind of later in the book, and their storyline really picks up in the end, contrary to Allison's kind of slowing down. But there was also like this whole subplot with Clem that just didn't add anything to the story, and again, just really slowed it down in a book that has some pacing problems to begin with. It kind of pains me, but I'm gonna have to give this just a 3-star read. It was very well researched, especially honoring Allison Balfour, who was a real person. I do think, again, I really like Cooke's writing style. I thought this was well written, but this just wasn't as captivating as I expected. I wanted a lot more witching and magic in a book with the word witch in the title. There's magic there, but it's kind of just barely. I guess I expected more from this, and I'm pretty disappointed. And again, this could be a book that maybe it's just, by the time I was reading this, wasn't in a great place, so that could be coloring my review. But looking at Goodreads, it kind of feels like I'm not alone in thinking that this is a very middle-of-the-road book. So that's where we're leaving that. Next up was another holdover from spooky season, and one that has rave reviews on Bookstagram, and that is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. Let's go ahead and see what this promised. To 8-year-old Bella, her family is her world. There's Mommy, Daddo, and Grandma Ruth. But there is also Other Mommy, a malevolent entity who asks her every day, "Can I go inside your heart?" When horrifying incidents around the house signal that Other Mommy is growing tired of asking Bella the question over and over, Bella understands that unless she says yes, her family will soon pay. Other Mommy is getting restless, stronger, bolder. Only the bonds of family can keep Bella safe. But cracks in her parents' marriage are starting to show. The safety Bella relies on is about to unravel. But Other Mommy needs an answer. Incidents Around the House is a chilling, wholly unique tale of true horror about a family as haunted as their home. So I'm really torn on this one. I loved, we're gonna say loved, the first 65% of this. I was scared. I was curious. I was here for it. And this little family being terrorized by Other Mommy because she is scary. The last 35% was very lather, rinse, repeat, but it wasn't needed. There are only so many times I can read the same scene just with like a different backdrop. And then came the ending, and then I was a little mad. The ending is dark, and I don't mind that. That's not what I have a problem with. I just want to understand a few things. I didn't mind some of the ambiguity in We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kleiber, because for the most part, I got it, or at least felt that I could make my own ending fit with what we were given as readers. I had my own interpretation, and I liked that. I was okay with that. This was kind of bad ambiguous in my opinion, and in a way, maybe I just think the ending was just bad. I have no idea what some of the ending means. I don't know what to do with that ending, and I gave up a lot of my time to just get finished with this book because it was so good. And then that ending kind of was a slap in the face. I wanted some real answers. Now, I will take some of the blame here. Maybe I'm the dumb one, and I just didn't comprehend what the story was trying to tell me, or I just didn't understand some of the themes. But man alive, was that ending bad. I was so mad. And I'm glad that I'm not alone, as there are a lot of like Google searches for this book's ending to be explained. Now, I did see a post on Reddit explaining the ending, and the poster found a way to find some like light and hope in the ending, and I did appreciate that. But I really wanted that to be in the actual book. This ending definitely didn't do itself any favors for me, which is such a shame because the majority of the book was so good. The descriptions of Other Mommy were horrifying, And while I was reading this, anytime my house made like a sound, I would like freeze and be scared to look around the corner just in case this entity had found its way into my home. I also did actually like how the book was written from the point of view of a child and not formatted like a traditional story. It made for a faster read and added to the tension, seeing some of the adults freak out while Bella is, well, she's obviously scared of other mommy and her questions. She also knows other mommy. The things aren't as scary to her, at least at first. But seeing the reactions of the others from Bella's childish point of view was a really good choice. I think that was a neat way to write the story. Though there were times that Bella reads a little younger than she is. Like it says she's supposed to be 8. And now I don't currently know any 8-year-olds as my nephews are older, but there were times that she seemed more like a kindergartner, or I expected her to be like 5 or 6 with the way some of the other characters are treating her or the way she's talking. I also think that there were a lot of monologues, and it just didn't feel realistic with how they talk to Bella at times. And her mom telling her some of the things she does when she thinks Bella is sleeping was something. Like, ma'am, please don't dump your shit on your daughter. That's not okay. I do think the story has some good themes, and I did appreciate the conversations that her dad has with her. He wants to guide her and teach her and just wants the best for her. But again, the saving grace with this was the creepy scenes with other mommy, because yikes on bikes. Like, I thought they were very scary. I thought they were very well done. But that ending definitely detracts a star from my rating. I also found an uptick in typos near the end, which honestly, at this point, I'm starting to wonder if it's book of the month or if it was just sloppy editing as a whole. I've found quite a few errors in other books that are printed by book of the month, but that could also just be me noticing it because now I'm more like primed to look for it. But that was something that also took away from my reading experience. In the end, I'm going to give this 3 stars. It met the goal of being creepy, and I liked the different structure and unique point of view. But the ending, it made me mad, and it took away from my reading experience, and again, kind of just soured my whole reading experience with this and brought it down a little bit. It's almost like had I finished halfway through, probably would have had a much higher rating. Next up was a book by Wendy Walker, an author whose work I've always enjoyed, and that was Emma in the Night. Let's go ahead and see what this promised. One night, 15-year-old Cass and her 17-year-old sister Emma disappear. The family car is found deserted at a nearby beach, but the authorities are baffled by what could have become of them. 3 years later, with just the clothes on her back and no evidence or credibility to back up her claims of what happened, Cass returns home, without her sister. Her tale is one of kidnapping and isolation, and the mysterious island where the two were held. But Cass's story has holes, and to forensic psychiatrist Dr. Abby Winter, something about it just doesn't add up. As an expert in narcissistic personality disorder, Dr. Winter looks deeply into Cass's family to uncover the truth. She looks at the mother, a woman so beautiful on the surface and so damaged, and damaging, beneath. She looks at the stepfather and the stepbrother, each so uniquely troubled and dangerous. And she looks at Cass herself. What she finds will shock those searching for Emma and reveal a twisted story of a deeply dysfunctional family and the lengths to which Cass has gone to bring about redemption. So, yeah, I read this because I wanted a good book, as all of my reads so far this month had been pretty mid, and I normally love Walker's work. And this did nothing to change my mood about my reads for this month. Why November? Why? I really struggled with this. Now, again, I'm going to take some of the blame. This could have been a situation of me reading this at the wrong time. Like I said, November was a very heavy month for me, and maybe my grieving brain just, for whatever reason, couldn't handle this. But on the other hand, I do just think that this book is a bit disjointed. I really had to pay attention, but also found that this wasn't holding my interest, and my god, this moves so slowly. I've read a few other reviews that hint at the same thing, Maybe it's me, maybe it's Maybelline, or maybe this just wasn't as good as I'd hoped it was going to be. There's a lot going on in this, and there are a lot of characters that would be casually mentioned. I had no idea who they were, and then I'd flip back to the beginning of the book and be like, oh wait, this is the stepbrother? Like, I forgot about him. I mean, really, I was on the struggle bus with this, which sucks because I do think Walker is a very talented writer. And honestly, it wasn't even just forgetting people. I didn't like anyone in this. I know I should feel bad for Cass, but I feel nothing towards her. Cass's past is tragic, but she was also very annoying too. I didn't sign up for endless monologues by Cass. I wanted a thriller. There are very few thrills to be had in this. You could make it thrilling by taking a drink every time you read the word narcissist. That is, if you want to depart from this world severely wasted. I didn't think any of the characters were that likable or interesting. I mean, I guess Abby, the psychiatrist, is somewhat interesting, but she also has her own set of issues, and maybe the best character of all is Whit, the half-brother. He's probably the only likable one in the bunch. Honestly, this book just felt really off and was leaning way too hard into telling instead of showing. I read about 150 pages and then I started skimming. And I mean skimming pretty much the rest of the book, and I kind of didn't really care what I missed. This was very close to being a DNF and is going to come in as a 2-star read. Walker's reputation really helped her here, or this potentially could have been a 1-star. By the time I got to the end and they're explaining everything, I didn't care, and some of it didn't add up or make any sense with what was going on. I do think this was a book that was earlier in Walker's career. I think she had one before this, and then this came out. And right now, I am so glad I have read some of her other stuff before I read this, because had I read this first, I would not be so keen to pick her up again. If you have to read something by Walker, I would not recommend this one. I really liked Don't Look for Me, and I do have All Is Not Forgotten on my bookshelves back there, and I read really great things about that. People seem to have really loved that, if they didn't like this. So I'm definitely not writing her off. But this soured my already poor mood for reading this month. I don't know what was going on I do know what was going on this month, but I was really hopeful for some good books. But that does bring me to my last book for this month, which was This Girl's a Killer by Emma C. Wells, which I was really excited for, as I had heard it was really funny and dark, and I was just ready for hopefully something good. I took this on a trip so I could read it on the plane and train. So let's go ahead and see what this one promised. Cordelia Black loves exactly 3 things: her chosen family, her hairdresser, worth every penny plus tip, and killing bad men. By day, she's an ambitious farmer rep with a flawless reputation and designer wardrobe. By night, she culls South Louisiana of unscrupulous men, monsters who think they've evaded justice, until they meet her. Sure, the evening news may have started throwing around phrases like serial killer, but Cordelia knows that's absurd. She's not a killer, she is simply karma, and being karma requires complete and utter control. But when Cordelia discovers a flaw in her perfectly designed system for eliminating monsters, pressure heightens. And it only intensifies when her best friend starts dating a man Cordelia isn't sure is a good person. Someone who might just unravel everything she has worked for. Soon enough, Cordelia has come face to face with the choices she's made, the good, the bad, and the murderous. Both her family and her freedom depend on it. So overall, I really liked this. I was glad that I ended November on a high note. I liked Cordelia, and I found her, fun and quirky for a killer. She has some serious Joe Goldberg from You vibes, and went about her after work activities a la Dexter by justifying it. And I really loved how loyal she was to her best friend and her goddaughter. This has strong found family vibes, and I really liked that. I also really loved that Cordelia was super snarky and sarcastic, which I obviously identify with, and she has worked very, very hard for the life that she has and projects exactly who she wants to be. The comedic situations were on the zany and ridiculous side, which honestly was kind of fun. Like, the subject matter of some of the book is very serious, like who she is going after, but when things start going wrong, they went horribly wrong. And it kind of gave me like Shopaholic vibes with some of its slapstick humor. It would almost be as if like Becky Bloomwood were to suddenly start killing bad men. It was chaotic, but it was also really fun. I would say, though, be ready to suspend some disbelief with this, but if you're willing to do that, you are in for a really good read. I also really appreciated how Cordelia was complex. She is quite the diva and is slowly losing control of everything, which is just driving her crazy. And she has flaws that come into play and help her grow throughout the story. There were times that I was like annoyed with her for her behavior, but then her bad choices had consequences, so that part felt really real. I also think that Cordelia had a really good balance of wins and losses throughout this. It's not just smooth sailing. She's not perfect. I mean, she's obviously killing people. And I do appreciate that the author had a note at the beginning of the book addressing that and like warning readers that this book will talk about it, and Cordelia does find some satisfaction in the work that she does. Now, there were a few things I didn't like. Like, it got a bit repetitive, but the repetition was kind of weird. It was in very small details. Like, some of the details were reused often and repeated verbatim that I sometimes wondered, like, did I already read this part? And I also noticed that there were quite a few typos and like errors in this that I wasn't expecting. And also, I mean, surprise for me, I really liked the romance subplot and was kind of annoyed that it was almost kind of just dropped by the end. I don't feel like there was a resolution to that piece. And that brings me to my next criticism, that there were a few subplots that felt either like half-baked or some things that I think were supposed to be twists, but weren't. I mean, they're not much of a surprise if you're paying attention. I also think there might have been something off with the pace, but again, I'm going to take some of the blame here, as I did read this on a trip, so I was picking this up sporadically, but it did feel a little bit slower than I expected, or we spend a lot of time having conversations, or there's a lot of introspection as we're in Cordelia's head as she tries to figure out what to do as things are going horribly wrong. But overall, compared to some of the other reads, I really liked this. I liked the vigilante story and how Cordelia will fiercely protect her found family. She will do the tough things for others who are good and innocent. She will become a monster to take out other monsters to bring justice to the victims and give them closure and safety. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars, definitely the best read this month. I honestly wouldn't mind a sequel, and I'm excited to see what Wells comes up with next. So overall, liked it. Again, very dark comedic humor, and this girl's a killer, and she enjoys killing. So if you're gonna read that, just expect to go into that with that mindset. Okay, so that wraps up everything that I read in November. If you have any recommendations for things that I should read in December, please leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for joining me in the reading room, and I hope to see you next month.